welcome to the OC Product Podcast, everyone. This is our third in our series of product foundations. And today we've got Jason Knight all the way from the UK. And we're going to be talking about better is better than not better. And what exactly that means, we'll get into. Jason is the host of the One Night in Product podcast. He is a B2B product management consultant, and he is the co-author of the State of B2B Product Management report, which was published just a few weeks ago, last month, right?
Yep.
All right. Awesome. Well, without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to Jason, and we'll get rolling.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, virtually speaking. You know, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. You know, it wouldn't have been nice to come get flown over and stuff. But you know, times are hard and all that. But hope everyone's doing well. Today we are going to talk. Well, originally we were going to just talk. I've kind of got this usual spiel that I do around, like, iterative change and trying to make product organizations better, and this kind of assumption that means that they're not better in the beginning, or to start with. But also because coming off the back of, as Greg mentioned, the B2B product management, State of B2B product management report, it's actually our first chance to really kind of almost have some data to back up the fact, or the hypothesis that these things need to be fixed in the first place. Because, of course, it's easy enough for me to sit there and say, well, okay, yeah, I work with a few companies, both in UK, Europe, across the world, and I see a few things. But, of course, even as a consultant, I still only see a relatively small subset of organizations. So we'll talk about that report in a minute, but it's we kind of smoosh the two things together, because I think there's some really interesting findings to set the scene. And then there'll be some recommendations around sort of organizational product change as well. But before we go ahead with that, it is mandatory audience participation time, which sadly doesn't shorten to anything that sounds cool, mapped. But anyway, I would like anyone that's watching to head over to Slido if you have a spare window open, or if you want to point your phone at the QR code, and just give me a kind of a sense check, sort of temperature, sort of finger in the air, how you would rate your organization. And I've spelt that the UK way, the proper way. It's with a Z for the rest of the presentation. But in terms of doing proper product right now, 1 very bad all the way through to 5 very good. Kind of hot take. I'd be interested to see if anyone wants to. Here we go. Quite good, quite bad, neither good nor bad. Quite bad. Is that a very bad, a 0 or 1 down the bottom? I don't know. I think we've got 4 in there. Let's see if we can get another couple. One of the interesting things that you tend to find with these types of polls is that you get quite a lot of in the middle. Like you don't get very many, like that many very bads, but in fact, whenever I've run it before, you almost never get any very goods. Although here we've got a couple, so I'm pretty pleased actually. Looks like some of you are doing pretty well. So we've got some quite goods and some quite bads and some neither good nor bads. That's fairly common, kind of sort of clustered around the middle. Luckily, no very bads, but oh no, we've got some. Okay. Well, anyway, I'm glad to see that things are kind of fit into the pattern, and I'm glad that quite good's winning, because that's good. We all wanted to be doing good work, but I think at the same time, even quite good can still be improved, right? Oops. Right. So, as I said, we ran a report. We kind of did a survey back at the back end of last year, 2025, because we were really curious to find out what was going on in product management, and specifically in our case, and by our, I mean myself and my collaborator, Saeed Khan. Maybe some of you know him. He's based in Canada, actually. He's worked across North America, another long-standing B2B product coach. And we were really keen to kind of have some data to back up our hypothesis that product management needs to be fixed. So it is B2B focused, our report. If any of you here are B2B people, you can go to that link over there and click that, or you can scan that QR code. It's free. You don't have to put an email address in. You can't get spammed. We don't know who you are. Just go and download it. Been told that the report is pretty good, pretty interesting. We interviewed about 425 people, and they took quite a long time, spent quite a lot of time into completing it as well. So we've got some very thoughtful responses. We've got some pretty decent representation, certainly of North America and of Europe. A little bit less in sort of LATAM and APAC, but maybe next year we'll get a bit more traction over there. But some really interesting findings in there, some of which we'll talk about in a mo. Yeah, I genuinely recommend anyone that works in B2B, B2B2C, go and check it out. As I say, you don't have to put your email address in. We can't find you or hunt you down afterwards. But so some of the key findings from that report kind of sort of set the state of play or the status quo. Number one, strategy frequently sidelined by operational reactivity. Very common, obviously, the fact that, again, certainly in B2B, you've got the sales side really kind of pushing for that kind of short-termism, got to make the quarter. Strategy is a good thing, and it's like sounds like a good longer-term plan, but it's always going to be derailed by the kind of, I don't know, the present, like the right now. And any money is good money, which is, money's money, right? We all need to make money, but at the same time, our job as product people is to try and show how, for example, having and following a strategy will actually help us to make more money than just doing all this other stuff. But yeah, so very common. And to be honest, I'm pretty sure that that's something that's shared on the B2C side as well. Maybe not with sales teams, but of course, chasing down opportunities is kind of, there's a certain type of founder that's always going to do that. One of the most interesting findings that we found was a significant disconnect between product leaders and their teams. So product leaders thought they were doing a pretty reasonable job as product leaders, but the teams reporting into these product leaders seem to be slightly less convinced. We'll talk about some of that in a minute, but kind of a fascinating sort of divergence there, because of course you can't fix stuff if there's no even agreement about what stuff needs to be fixed or who's doing what job. So yeah, definitely a fascinating insight there. Certain lack of product discovery, very under prioritized in a number of organizations. We all like to think as product people that we're here to go and get close to the users and build empathy and really understand like the needs of the many. But we're finding that certainly in B2B, user-centric validation is still very much overridden by sales pressure or just the industry experts, subject matter experts within the organization, and obviously the leaders as well. So again, that's the leader thing is not something that is unique to B2B, but combined with all the other things, it kind of makes discovery a bit of a dream for some people. We found that AI adoption was high, as you might expect, and I'm sure it's got even higher since, but actually found that a lot of the AI use cases that people were reporting were the kind of obvious AI use cases, like summarizing notes or just sort of writing PRDs and spec documents and stuff like that. All of this kind of 100x PM, builders and designers and everything all in one. Didn't really see a lot of that. And again, that's something that's no doubt going to build, but it also encourages us maybe a little bit to sort of step outside of our kind of social media bubble and realize that there are a lot of PMs out there that have still really only used AI for some of the basics, and there's still quite a lot of opportunity out there to use it for more stuff, as long as they're using it for the right stuff. But we also found, and this really interested me actually, because there's a lot of doomerism on social media about product management. Certainly, I've seen it on LinkedIn. Everyone's saying that product managers are going to be, the craft is going to die. We don't need PMs anymore. Everyone's going to get replaced by AI builders, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we expect there to be some quite a lot of negativity out there, because of course these people are going to be being affected by that. But actually, what we found that with some few exceptions that are definitely about to give up, that the majority of people actually felt pretty good about product management and the opportunities ahead. So we're really happy to see, go product managers. We still got something. We'll see how that goes over the next year, but I'm really hoping that that positivity remains. Now, we talked a little bit about areas, but I also want to kind of focus on some of the biggest problems that these teams are reporting. So the top problem, we kind of touched on it as one of the key takeaways, was overemphasis on delivery instead of strategy. So just feature factory, ship, just keep building the next thing, hit the deadline. OKRs, faux KRs more like. They just don't, there's no kind of outcome-based anything. It's all just build. Again, very common that you hear that. I've heard that when I'm going around talking to organizations, so it wasn't a surprise. But it was a big, like literally a hair on fire problem for basically half of the people that answered the survey. Gaps in product skills and leadership capability. So this idea that we've got kind of teams that aren't necessarily that capable of doing all of the things, maybe in some cases because they've kind of been stopped from doing them. But also a lot of thoughts around this idea of like undertrained product leadership. There's a lot of people, I don't know if this is a B2C thing as well, but a lot of sort of B2B cliches of like, yeah, let's get some domain expert, subject matter expert in as the product leader. They've got no experience at all at like running a product team, but they know the industry and they know the domain, and they can talk about it, and they're maybe quite strategic. And they kind of, there's this gap between product leaders and the people that they're leading, which is obviously frustrating for the people that they're leading, but also means that the people that are running it don't necessarily know the best solutions to get some of this stuff done. Generally poor prioritization, bad decision making, lots of knee jerking, roadmaps frequently bypassed for short-term revenue gains. Never happens, obviously always happens. Lack of clear goals, alignment with business strategy. Of course, that does suppose that there is a business strategy in the first place. So just everything about being about revenue and no real idea about how to get there. And interestingly, kind of weak or untrusted product processes. So no discovery processes, no validation, or no data-driven decision making. A lot of anecdotal evidence being used for prioritization decisions. And if we sit there and talk about sort of product operating models or product operating systems or whatever we want to call them, that's also an issue, because we sit there and we say, well, whilst we all hate the word process, at the same time, everything is a de facto process, and we need to work out, we can't optimize things and fix things if we're not looking at these things and trying to work out how we can prove that product thinking is going to actually help us get somewhere. So definitely some interesting problems. I would be curious, if you want to hit the Slido again, if any of those are problems, or any of those are your biggest problem right now, or if you've got some other problems that maybe we'll talk about in the Q&A. So I don't know if anyone fancies dipping their toe in the Slido water for one last time. So overemphasis on delivery over strategy, gaps in product skills and leadership capability. That's all going to move around now, so I can't read it out anymore. Weak product processes, that's a 67%. Poor prioritization, we've got down here. So we've got a few people. Weak product processes is ahead at the moment. And of course, in some ways, you might sit there and think, well, weak product processes are probably one of the easiest things to fix, or at least try to fix, because we're in control of those. Whereas maybe overemphasis on delivery over strategy or poor prioritization, well, prioritization, of course, we're kind of in charge of, but we kind of take that through the strategic lens as well. Maybe we're in a situation where, it's harder to kind of, change the company around us, but definitely interesting to see that, feature factory, feature factory, feature factory. Sad times. Hopefully we're all, not being encouraged to speed up too much in the face of AI. But yeah, so
there's a lot of, before you move off of this, I see a lot of alignment between, if one is present, other things are going to be present, right? If you have weak goals and alignment, you're going to be overemphasized on delivery over strategy, and you're going to be poorly prioritized. Yeah, the Hydra has many heads, I guess we could say. It's and obviously these are all symptomatic of a bigger problem, but it is interesting to see like how those problems manifest themselves in different organizations as well, and kind of what people see as being their biggest problem as well. So looks like feature factory wins for this one, and product processes on following behind. I'm going to skip through these relatively quickly, but just some of the areas that ICs reported wanting to spend more time: analyzing product data, conducting user research and discovery, working with leadership, doing market analysis, doing roadmaps, and working with stakeholders. All things that are kind of fundamental product tasks that I might call them. And in some cases, almost all of the people are not doing it, or not doing it as much as they want to be doing. 82% of people want to be spending more time analyzing product usage data, which probably means that they don't believe that they're doing that much of it at the moment, or certainly not enough of it. 80%, basically 81%, doing user research, one of the core kind of evidence-based fundamentals of product management. So there's a lot of people out there that want to spend more time doing product management and a lot less time doing things like basically glue work, sort of telling developers what to do, writing tickets for people, running sprint plannings and backlog management. Areas which product managers need to have certainly some input into, but at the same time, I do see a lot of product people being kind of forced into effectively kind of project management and delivery management because no one else is kind of stepping up to the plate. So that's definitely something that when I work with teams, I'm trying to get them to do, is to kind of spread some of that responsibility around, rather than the poor old PM
being expected to do all of these things, never getting to do them because they're working on all of these other areas, which frankly are not fully their responsibility. So obviously there's different opinions and arguments about that, but I definitely think that people should be spending more time on that, the previous bucket than on this bucket. And leaders, they want to be spending more time spending on product vision and strategy, driving discovery practices, aligning strategy with company goals, reviewing product investments, coaching and mentoring product team members. 50% basically of product leaders aren't spending enough time, as they put it, coaching and mentoring product team members, which is ultimately one of the big parts of their job. 70% of them want to be spending more time setting product vision and strategy rather than whatever they're doing instead. People aren't doing a good enough job, or aren't being able to be doing a good enough job, and they're spending all of their time either managing resource allocations. Everyone hates the word resource, but managing resource allocations, or fighting stakeholders and managing executive relationships, playing politics, making sure execution works for some reason, because that can't be handled by the rest of the organization, and monitoring team performance, which I might say is probably part of their job, but maybe they're spending a bit too much time doing that. Ultimately, all this points to product leaders and ICs kind of really being in a situation where they're not really spending as much time where they want to be, and they're spending a lot less time where they should be, or they want to spend, they want to spend less time where they shouldn't be, and they want to be spending more time where they should be, and they don't have a chance to do that. But also, the most interesting takeaway for me from this report was the massive gap in perceptions between how IC PMs believe their leaders are doing and how their leaders are doing. So you've got leaders here saying 76% of leaders saying they're doing an okay job at setting a clear vision and product strategy. 33% of ICs think that their bosses are doing that. 88% believe that they're aligning teams around shared goals and priorities. 34% of the ICs think the same. And you see the same pattern throughout basically all of them. Investing in their people, removing blockers, fostering ownership, enabling effective prioritization. The gap is huge. And this basically means it's even more difficult to kind of quote unquote fix things, because how can you fix things if you have the two kind of cohorts of people that need to be involved in fixing it are so far apart in kind of understanding how good a job is being done in the first place? It either means that the leaders are doing a bad job and they don't even know they're doing a bad job, or the leaders are doing a good job, but they're somehow unable to communicate that good job to their ICs, and therefore the ICs don't think their leaders are doing a good job. Okay, so that's a communication problem. Or ICs just have such an unreasonable expectation of leaders that it's impossible for anyone to live up to the standard that the ICs think they should do. Now, I don't know, obviously it'll be different for every single organization, but I think personally that one of the biggest things that leaders need to do, anyone reading this needs to do even, within the kind of context of their organization, B2B or otherwise, is try and work out how to at least have consistency within their team to make sure that their teams know what's going on, what's working and what's not, because that gap just feels completely unsustainable to me. So be interesting to see if that's something that you feel is happening in your organization. I certainly see in other organizations, and it's kind of really stark, the size of that gap in the context of the organizations that we, the people from the organizations that we surveyed. So what we're sitting there is saying that, certainly based on the back of that B2B report, again, which I can only encourage you to go and download after this, is that there were some opportunities for improvement. You might sit there and say, okay, well, how on earth are we going to do that? Like, there are probably so many things to fix in any organization that we've basically got no chance of making any difference. This is actually quoting myself here, LinkedIn post from a little while back now, 2 days ago when I first took the screenshot. For the most part, no business leader cares about being product-led or empowered, or rather they do care, but only if it delivers superior business results and maintains or motivates and attracts and retains talent. But it only cares about that if it delivers superior results for the business. If we want to get, or if we want to be product-led, or if we want to be empowered or want to do all of the things that we want to do, we need to prove that that's actually going to do better for the company than the company is currently doing. Now, I've worked with organizations that are doing kind of okay, just as they are. Like they're not product anything particularly, but at the same time, they're making enough money. Or I've worked with, for example, banks that, basically as long as their interest rates are lower than their competitors, they're going to get good business, no matter how crappy their apps are or whatever. And that's just how it is in that industry. And I've worked in other industries where there's a lot of opportunity to actually become a lot better if they actually just started to invest in certain areas. But that investment and those solutions have to be about delivering superior results. No one's going to sit there and say, oh, hey, you've got the inspired or whatever, and therefore if I read it, it's all going to be fine. It's going to be very difficult to persuade someone to care about that. They need to, or you kind of need to frame it in ways or in a context that they already care about, i.e., again, superior results for the business, getting the CFO on board because you're going to be delivering additional retention, or you're going to be kind of driving the numbers up, or helping the sales team to get stuff sold. These are things that people care about much more than whether or not you're doing a good continuous discovery loop. You need to prove that that's going to give a benefit. Now, I like to think of change in two ways: top down or bottom up. So if we think about top down, the CEO or the leadership team, they're all like, yeah, great, we've drunk the Kool-Aid, we believe this is a thing. We've now given you the implicit and explicit authority to make this change yourself. The executive team are on board. They have conviction that this is the right thing to do. They believe that it's going to deliver results, and there's potentially some level of urgency that mean that this has to happen now. There's something that's driving this change and something that they believe in. That's great, and that's what I might call them sort of the Marty Kagan model, because that's something that he very strongly advocates. That set up a pilot team, get the buy-in, set up a pilot team, prove that it works, then move it sideways. But you have to have that top-down remit first, otherwise none of that's going to happen. The alternative is the bottom-up approach. Kind of take it from the shop floor and start to try and drive change from within. Now that does require a certain different set of characteristics. You need to have the actual influence to be able to influence the people around you. You need to be able to prove that the small changes that you're making actually are making any difference at all. You need to have the psychological safety to try things, and if it doesn't work quite as well, then to have another go or to try something else. And you need to have a certain level of autonomy so that you can actually change the way that you work. You're not being kind of mandated by some process wonk somewhere else in your organization. Now, the top-down kind of CEO mandated thing, I mean, it can work. It can also not work. I've certainly seen a bunch of changes not working in my time that were very sort of top-down driven, either because they're kind of just sort of talking the talk but not really walking the walk, or the middle management layer tends to kind of get in the way because in many sort of situations the kind of the incentives are wrong. Like you're sort of sitting there saying, okay, well, we're telling everyone that they've got to do this, but actually we're still paying them to do this. Or the middle management haven't been brought in, or they don't really understand the change, or you're trying to shift the company around them. Middle management is where these ideas go to die. Or you could just try and change too much at the same time. It just crashes the system. Or you do that pilot that we talked about, but all the other people that want to do the same thing are sort of sitting there complaining that the pilot team get to play all the cool toys, but they don't get to do any of this, start to build resentment. Or you just end up, having a successful pilot, but actually it's hard to actually work out how that pilot even transfers into other teams, let alone whether you can do that in an orderly fashion. So if you want to get started down that way, obviously you need to define the change, to get that buy-in from the leadership team. They need to drive it, align the incentives so that you're not sitting there arguing against yourself in meetings, or having people arguing in different directions in meetings. Have some kind of urgency narrative that this is a thing that needs to happen now. And again, try and build that pilot, but try and build scaling across ways into that versus just doing a pilot for the sake of it and having no idea how to move it to the next team and the next team. Or there's the other model, which is the bottom up, where frankly it fails because you kind of need heroics on the ground floor to try and actually drive some of this stuff through. There's the risk of local optimization. You might sit there and say, well, actually, we'll make some changes and they'll improve a little bit, but they're never going to improve things as far as they could. Maybe it fails to move outside of the team that starts to change because actually, everyone else is kind of fine, or they don't believe that they have the same problem. Maybe it's actually hard to prove impact, or you also have this kind of concept of, well, maybe people are just fighting to try and change stuff. Maybe they've tried to change stuff in the past and they've been burned and they don't want to try and do it again. Now, it's interesting because there's a book called The Jolt Effect, which is about sales, not product as such, but this idea about how people look at status quo and they say, oh, well, if someone doesn't want to change stuff, then they're happy with the status quo. That's actually not true, and that's what the book talks about. People aren't necessarily happy with the status quo, but they could still be very happy to not make a change, because if they have to decide to make a change, they're the ones that then get the responsibility for making that change, and if it doesn't go wrong, then it's them that gets it in the neck. So some people, even though they hate the status quo, will still not make a decision to fix the status quo, they'll be happy if someone else does it. But if they have to make the decision, it can kind of, that fear can stop them making the right moves, because they just don't want to be the ones that kind of left holding the baby when it all starts to go wrong. But if you can start doing this, then I cheekily call it the minimum viable improvement. Identify one of those. What's the first next best step you can take? Try and find something that you can measure, make obvious impact, and make that impact visible, and make sure you're sharing that proof around the organization, and storytelling around that, versus just kind of chipping away on your own. You need people to see the results and the benefits of what it is that you're doing. So I kind of call this applying product management to product management. We talk about, like we talked about the dangers of I don't know, local maximums, or like just only improving stuff to a point, but never quite going as far as you can. As I appreciate that. Like, if you're sitting there saying a top-down mandate, we can change all of these things, cool. Bottom-up mandate, maybe we don't change as many things, or we don't get as far. But I would take a local maximum over a local minimum every day of the week. I've worked with enough organizations to see how much they struggle when, with all of these inefficient processes and bad practices and such, that even just fixing some of them makes their day-to-day lives better. So a local maximum for me definitely outranks a local minimum, or as I might put it, better is better than not better. Just because you can't do all of the things, or you can't do all of the things yet, doesn't mean you can't do any of the things now. It's always possible to change something. And from my perspective, it's always worth trying. The time, I think, as I put in that LinkedIn post, the time is now. Start now. But don't try and do too much all at the same time. We talk about Kanban. Everyone's probably aware of Kanban, kind of to do, in progress, and done. And there's this kind of idea that you see in software development that actually it's really easy to start doing things. It's really hard sometimes to stop them. And the whole point of Kanban is to reduce the amount of stuff that's kind of in flight at the same time. So reducing work in progress. So rather than trying to change everything all at the same time, just change one thing at the same time, and just get that done to a point, move it on, then move on to the next one, then move on to the next one. Kind of iterate your way to perfection, or perfection as far as you can get it. Kind of call this building a backlog for change. So you kind of diagnose the state, where you're at the moment, kind of build that sort of effectively a backlog, a list of all of the things that are holding you back, and the kind of the size of the impact of those things. Prioritize solutions to those things, or fixing those things based on impact. So you want to sit there and say, okay, well, if we change this one thing, this is the most important thing, this is causing us the most pain, let's fix that thing first. Create or decide what your minimum viable improvement is, like your first step that you can try to just move that in the right direction, and then demonstrate the value, communicate that value around the organization, so that people can say, okay, well, great, Jason's done that thing, and the team's doing this quicker now, or we know we have more information, or we're happy with the decisions, or whatever. And you can keep going round and round, either prioritizing the next thing, or re-diagnosing, kind of relisting stuff out, doubling down on the stuff that you're working on. And if you look at this loop, it's very similar to just product management in general. This idea that it's our job as product people to kind of go out there and work out the current state of play. What are the biggest opportunities out there for us right now that are going to drive us in the direction that we want to drive? We don't have to solve all of the things. We don't have to solve our vision in a day. We've got years to solve our vision, but we can take steps. We can make choices along the way to prioritize, again, for impact, to try and work out how we can make things better step by step. And if you keep doing that, eventually your product gets better, better, and better. And in this case, your product organization gets better and better and better, or at least better than it was to start with. So that's the kind of the iterative change, or what I would, as I say, kind of call this kind of bottom-up building of a better product organization. But we have to also acknowledge that there are some endemic problems within organizations, some problems that are so large that the average IC product manager that's kind of sitting on the shop floor is not necessarily going to be able to do all on their own. And sometimes these changes require leadership buy-in. Sometimes they require product leadership, as in, and sometimes they require even more than that. You can even higher up the chain. But the most important thing is to work out how to start to introduce the idea that these things could be done, and maybe get the buy-in from more senior leaders to get them involved, and maybe get a bit more top down. Maybe it's not all the way top down, maybe it's like middle down or something like that. But this idea that sometimes you've got to go big. So we'll kind of slip back to some of the recommendations. Actually, some of these recommendations are from the end of the State of B2B Product Management, but kind of slightly reworked. But kind of two sections here. There's kind of this idea that you've got things that IC product managers can do and things that product leaders can do to try and drive change or advocate for change within their organizations. Yeah. So first of all, if you're an IC product manager and you're sitting there saying, well, we've got all these things that we should be changing and none of them are changing and I'm really frustrated and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like, obviously, first of all, I feel you, because I understand, and having been in that sort of, even as a leader, having been in that situation, sometimes you just sit there and you're like, well, where do we even start? And how do we even start to get people to think about this stuff? However, like, there are 3 steps here, like one of which is share whatever materials you can with your leaders. So obviously the State of B2B Product Management Report is a great starting point if you work in B2B product management. But there are many other reports out there, and there are other blog posts and articles and podcasts and this and that and the other books. Now, not one of those is probably going to solve everything for you. But one of the good things about using these types of resource is that they're not from you. And by that, I mean, it's not just you moaning or complaining or being political because you don't like the way that something, or you're not personally judging someone else's decision. You're just sitting there saying, oh, hey, boss, look, this is this thing or this report or this whatever. Have a look at that. Like, is there anything in that kind of resonate with you? Do you think that this is something that kind of might help us or whatnot? And you can, so again, you can share these reports and you can use those, or materials, and use those to kind of influence your leadership to at least be thinking about these types of issues. Bring them into whatever monthly product lunch and learns or whatever it is that you do, or bring it up in your next one-to-one. Oh yeah, I was reading this report. Hey, do you want a copy? Most leaders are still interested in reading stuff and finding things out. Maybe they just didn't find it out themselves yet. So introduce it to them. Try and seed the ideas. There you go. Build a coalition. Now, this is, again, very critical when you're kind of a relatively junior individual contributor, when you're sort of sitting there saying, well, how am I going to change an organization? Again, you're probably not going to on your own. You're going to need buy-in, but you're also going to need friends. You're going to need friends within the organization who can sit there and say, well, yeah, I think that too. Now, ideally, this is something, from me, as opposed to from the report, you just sit there and say, well, ideally that coalition will be not just product people. Maybe there's other people within the organization, customer success people or sales people or developers or whoever it is within the organization that also believe the thing that you believe, that will also effectively report back the same problems that you're seeing, at least so you can start to think about ways that you could solve them. So this whole point here, like there's strength in numbers. You sit there and say, the more people that believe a thing, the less easy it is to ignore that thing is a thing. Bit of a awkward way of phrasing it, but just this idea that the more people that say something, the more likely you are to get buy-in. So making sure that you have coherence and consistency between you and your colleagues is a really important first step, and making sure that they're on your side. And then, proposing evidence-based solutions. Don't just sort of sit there and just complain. Take solutions to them, or give them an idea about things that you've read about, or potential options, or things that you've tried, or things that you think you should try. It's easy to just go up to someone and say, oh yeah, this sucks, and probably it does, but going up to people and kind of not just making it about you thinking it sucks, but actually kind of structure some kind of solution or some kind of opportunity, an opportunity solution tree. Here's 5 things we could try that could help with this. Some of them probably won't work, but if we tried this one, maybe we can make a start. Worth doing a little bit of work yourself, bit of discovery on your organization, bit of discovery on your team, to try and work out if there's anything that you can do and propose versus just going and complaining. Now, if you're a product leader or a CEO, even like a leader within the organization, assess your organization. Now, first of all, I'm just going to point out that these next 3 points are going to seem very self-serving since I do all of this for a job, but don't have to use me for any of this stuff, but you can use someone to do all of this stuff. Be it me or anyone else, or just do it yourself if you have to. The most important thing, though, is assessing your organization and making sure that you take a dispassionate look at what's going right and what's going wrong. Start to build that backlog, start to build those opportunities, start to understand how things tick. Now, I will say that, and again, as a consultant, I go out and when I speak to organizations, one of the things that they often say is, oh, well, we kind of knew this stuff, but we didn't know how deep it went, or we didn't know who it affected, or we didn't know that this impacted that, or whatever. Because, of course, and there's the point down here, I just see my mouse, it's hard to see the label when you're inside the jar. I don't know where that quote came from, but someone said it to me once on my podcast, and I liked it. This idea that, like, yeah, like you're in the middle of everything. It's really hard to diagnose things when you're in it. So getting external assistance can be helpful, but you can try and do it yourself. There are obviously frameworks and models to do that yourself. Make sure that your product leaders are trained. If you're a CPO and you've got directors and heads of product and such, make sure you invest in them, get them coaching, get them training, get them support, mentor them yourselves. If you're a CEO, if you're a leader, get your product, and you have a CPO or VP or whatever, again, do the same. There are loads of product leaders out there that, in my opinion, are doing great jobs in the context that they can, but could be doing a lot better if they just had guidance and the right way to do things. So training product leaders, and also, the last one, click, addressing skills gaps in the team. So train your ICs, basically. Product management is, as I've often put it, a uniquely hard job. Like, all jobs are hard, but product management is uniquely hard because it touches so many different areas all at the same time. Like, there's no just one thing that you have to learn. You have to be involved and interested in so many different parts of the organization at the same time. It's hard to be good at it, but of course, a lot of people are good at it, and many people are trying. There are plenty of skills that can always be developed, though. So, running workshops for your teams, running training for your teams, doing lunch and learns for your teams, building communities of practice within your teams, to try and work out ways to address those. Well, first of all, to assess those gaps. Obviously, you can assess the organization, you can assess the teams, but also just addressing any areas that come up. Okay, all of our product managers suck at discovery. Okay, let's invest in that. Let's not just leave it or hope that they're going to somehow be self-starters and do it themselves. Some of them will, maybe some of them won't. Maybe none of them will. Maybe they've all been, beaten up too many times by the organization to even bother trying anymore. Sometimes it does require, no matter how much we sit there and think of, like, 100x product managers and everyone being self-starters and CEOs of product and such, sometimes you do have to push them and give them ways to learn things. So it's important to try and do that as well. This is an if. I don't linger on this slide, but I would, if you do want help with this stuff, there is a page with some places there. It's on the front page of the B2B product report site as well, offering potential options for people, or for me, or for Saeed, my co-conspirator, to come and help you. So feel free to check that out and see if that's of any interest to anyone here, or if you can recommend it to your boss. Otherwise, I will take any questions, comments, anger, or hostility.
I'm going to start with one from myself. In the assess your organization, what are the benefits and detriments of doing this yourself as a product leader, as opposed to bringing in an outside person to be the bad cop? I once had when I was in a product leader role, and I had some not ideal news to communicate to the CEO. Paul Young from Pragmatic offered to be the bad cop and come in and say how wrong the CEO was, and I ended up doing it myself, and that didn't last as long as I would have liked.
Well, this is the most interesting thing, right? So again, without wanting to make it all about me, like, if I go and speak to an organization, there's two things that very often come back from the variety of assessments that I've done. One of which is I'm going to say, sheer gratitude of the people that I'm talking to have an outlet, that like a safe outlet, because they're not going to be sitting there talking to Doug from the product team, who's then going to go and, like, bring it up in their next review, like the next salary review or something like that. They're not going to have it brought up in a performance or an appraisal, or like be put on a performance management plan because they said the wrong thing. It's kind of almost like there's a safe space for them to actually unload on whatever. Now, that can obviously go too far. You're not a therapist. You do want it to be constrained and tightened. Make sure that you're kind of getting to the actual root cause of stuff. But having that kind of open, safe space where they know they can say stuff to you and not get in trouble is a good first step. But the second is exactly as you say, this idea that I think it's is it Rich Murnoff? Probably know Rich, who's he's been around the product world for a long time. Definitely recommend following and reading all his stuff if anyone hasn't. But Rich once said to me, so yeah, he's kind of almost like to some extent a role model for the work that I do these days, because he's been doing that for longer and been doing kind of the same sorts of stuff that I now do. But one of the things that he said, which still sticks with me, is that CEOs tend to value his advice directly in proportion to the size of the invoice that he gives them. As in, the more money they pay, or they pay him, the more likely they are to look at the advice. And there is this kind of external credibility. Is that the book, Money Stories? Yeah, I think I'm in that.
And that's how he teaches how to do it.
There you go. I think I'm in the back of that book somewhere, but name drop myself. But yeah, just this idea that external experts do give credibility. And that, sure, you have the chance to play bad cop, for sure. Obviously, that's something that still does also have to be kind of driven from within the organization, because an external consultant isn't generally going to be given the kind of.
You're in the front.
There you go. See, I've arrived. Good old Rich. I should definitely pay him some more money soon. But no, just this idea though that having this unbiased person who's and again, I was chatting to someone the other day about this, who so far at least isn't a client, but hopefully one day, and they're saying like, what I really want is someone to come in and tell me like it is, not how they think I want it to be. Like you're going in there and they know that you're, I mean, on the one hand, yeah, you're kind of a mercenary by default, because you're a consultant. You go in and you're doing it for money, and as soon as they stop paying you money, then you leave. But actually, guess what? That's also how jobs work, by the way. So it's not exactly, it's just like they tend to last longer. But just this point of like having someone that's not afraid to tell the CEO, to your point, that what they just said is nonsense, or words to that effect. Like, I think that can be powerful. But on the other hand, I also know that there's a lot of pushback around, from certain quarters around consultants and advisors and such, because they'll be like, well, they're just going to, we're going to pay them a chunk of money, and they're just going to come in and tell us what we already know. It's like, well, okay, maybe if they, but maybe the things that you already know are like so obvious, and actually the most important things that is exactly what's going to happen. I'd be surprised if they didn't come up with some other stuff that you didn't know as well. But even if the big things that come back are things that you already know, isn't it great to have that knowledge validated rather than just having to guess that whether you were right? You've got someone else to back you up and kind of give you credibility. But I think that there's arguments of both. I personally think that if you play it right within an organization, like if you can be sort of dispassionate and take a step back, then you could probably do it yourself if you kind of got some frameworks or downloaded some, whatever, got ChatGPT to give you some questions to ask or something like that. But I do also wonder about the product leaders, for example, sitting there and, as I've had in the past, taking offense when the first complaint comes up from whomever, like, oh yeah, well actually boss, I don't think you're doing a very good job. Okay, fine, this interview's over. Like, because they just get, it's hard to be judged. It's like when you get the 360 feedback and stuff, and you're just sitting there saying, well, great, well, now you've had a go at me, I'm gonna have a go at you now. So it's just taking a step back, and even if you've got just someone else from a different part of the organization doing it, I think it would still be better than maybe doing it yourself if you're the product leader that's ultimately being judged on your organization. The problem, of course, is that person from somewhere else in the organization may not have the skills or the frameworks or the mental models or whatever to assess product and product management. But I think that for me, external credibility, again, whether it's me or anyone else, there's loads of people doing this type of work. I think it's helpful because it does mean that you can get to the real truth and not be burdened by politics and hurt feelings.
All right. So there's another question that actually builds on the direction that you were taking in that response. This is from Paul Lehman. You'd like a little bit more on build a coalition. What are some of the best practices? And maybe you have a story, an anecdotal story to tell. You don't, I did.
I think for me, I mean, building. I mean, there's a couple of things. Like, obviously, so for example, I've done some sort of training workshops and such with like big UK retailers, for example. Big, huge companies, like tens of thousands of employees. God knows how many people they have in their product teams. I couldn't even count. and they're all from different parts of the organization. Like, you're coming into these workshops to talk about strategy or whatever, and they half of them don't even know each other. Like, it's such a large organization, and part of it, you just sit there and say, well, look, even if nothing else comes out of this of today's session, actually, the fact that you now know each other and have spent time hearing each other's approaches and challenges and etc., even that is beneficial, right? Because you sit there and you say, you've got, like, look, if it's a 3-person product team or something like that, then you've probably got a lot of consistency and coherence in the team already. Like, they're all working on probably basically the same product, bits of the same product. They all work for the same boss. They're all being judged on the same success or failure of the same overall product. Whereas if you're working for a huge supermarket or some like massive bank or something like that with so many people in, like, there's so little chance of there being consistency or coherence. And actually just hearing people's different experiences and problems and fears and worries and whatever, and trying to get some kind of coherent idea about, well, okay, this is the way the company works. I think that can be incredibly helpful. Now, there's a book called Strong Product Communities, I think, by Petra Villa, which is a good book around basically building communities of practice within organizations, within larger organizations. Again, if you're a team of 3, you probably don't need a community of practice. If you're in an organization with like 500 product managers or something like that, then it's quite likely that most of those don't know each other. So, like, building communities of practice where people that work on sort of similar types of product or similar areas, or maybe even different areas, but they're kind of the same level of seniority, so that people can start to come together and actually start to help to come to a common understanding about the biggest problems that the company is facing, but also with other parts of the organization as well. Like, it doesn't have to just be the product people. One of so Saeed, actually, who I did the report with, Saeed and I used to run a sales product training course. Sales and products in B2B, one of the worst relationships generally, because it's such a sort of 2 different worlds that are kind of colliding at the same in the same place. And you sit there and you say, well, these people, and I've certainly turned up in organizations where these people never talk. They just don't talk, or they do talk, but the only time they talk is when one team's shouting at the other team about some deadline or some new thing that's come up. So rather than that, hey, guess what? They're also people. Like, yeah, sure, they have different incentives, and they have different goals and different time frames and horizons and stuff, but they're still people, and they still basically care about the company and the direction it's going just as much as you do. They just have a different opinion or different mental model about how this sort of stuff works. Go and talk to them. Have them either with meetings and structured stuff, or do lunch and learns with each other, or grab a coffee or do lunch or whatever. Like, again, this does obviously require them to want to do that with you as well, but it's important for people to see people like as people, versus just this antagonistic mass of nonsense over there, which only ever talks to us when things are going wrong. Start to try and build a sort of mutual understanding. Like, one of the things that I often say, to the point where probably people get bored of me saying it, is like, we spend all of our time as product people complaining that we don't get to do enough discovery, we don't get to do enough user research, we don't get to go and do all the good empathy and problem finding and like opportunity identification with our customers and with our users. But then when anyone suggests that maybe we do that with our colleagues and our stakeholders, we kind of don't seem to do that always. And I think that's a mistake. These are people too. They've got their own needs, their own opinions, their own jobs to be done. Let's go and find out a bit about them as well.
So Eric Zittner has asked kind of 3 AI related questions. So I'll say them all, and you can kind of lump them into one response. I think it's like AI transition, right? So what steps should organizations take in the current environment of AI-driven layoffs, in part due to AI investment? That's one question. How to enable product teams who are empowered by AI to do more without technical support to lead an AI transition, and how to manage organizational challenges to reskill, reorganize for AI while supporting the existing product development workflows to maintain the legacy products.
Right. So to kind of try and resynthesize that, what to do about layoffs. I don't know if that's as in specifically like what to do after you've been laid off or how to stop being laid off.
I would interpret this as people have been let go.
Yep.
And how do you respond as a team? And how do you get product teams to be more empowered by AI?
Yep.
Without a lot of support around it, and how to manage the organization to reskill and reorganize for AI.
Yeah, so a big part for me around this AI, because we all have to accept that there's a lot of pressure on product teams, but also on leaders of product organizations from either their competitors or from the board, from the investors, to have an answer to the AI story. You can sit there in an organization talking about sort of legacy products. You can sort of sit there in an organization that's got 10, 15 years of legacy that's kind of crumbling around your ears. And everyone's like, well, what's the AI story? What's the AI story? Like, we need to start building new AI stuff. More AI, more AI. And it's like, okay, look, I understand. And I understand where that pressure is coming from. I like to think, and it depends on the company and how much pressure they're getting, and especially from competitors as well. Like, taking a step back and saying, well, okay, what problems do we need to actually solve? Like, not starting with AI and saying, okay, now let's find some problems to solve it, but starting with the problems, and hopefully maybe AI will be the solution to some of it. But we've all seen all of the different products with like just garbage AI features plugged into it that don't really hit the spot. So I don't want product people to kind of lose sight of the fact that we should be starting with the problem and not just sort of starting with a solution and trying to hammer it into every problem. But to be specific, I mean, if you've got legacy, well, maybe the middle question, like, how do we empower our teams? Right? How do we get people going with AI? Now, I talked earlier about the fact that like, a lot of the people that were answering these that answered this survey were like, well, yeah, we're kind of using it for document summarization and spitballing and writing PRDs and stuff like that. So, well, okay, even if you're just using it for that, that's still a lot better than not using it for that. And actually, those are some of the easiest use cases to get people up and running with. Like, you don't even need any special tools. I was actually surprised looking at the report that most people were just using just a Chat GPT or Claude chat interface. I know now Claude Code has become more exciting, and some people are using that. But I do think a lot of people are just still using just the basic interfaces. They're just the chat box that they can just type into. I also know that a lot of organizations, certainly bigger organizations, are kind of stuck, sadly, in the swamp using Copilot, which is like the worst one from anecdotal evidence, at least. And certainly when I've used it in organizations, it's fine, I guess. But like, even that is still better than you sit in an organization and you'd be chatting to someone saying, well, okay, you want to write a document or do some, find some info, get some information about this. Have you even tried using even Copilot? Oh no. Okay, well, maybe just try doing that first, and spend 5-10 minutes with them. Just if they've not done it yet, just getting them started. Training courses, obviously, that's a way to do it. There's plenty of online ones. There's obviously workshops and stuff you can do with people as well. I did a workshop back in December with a travel company, and it was really fascinating to sort of watch them just like, from what I can tell, just using these tools for the first time. You don't need technical support. I mean, you do need technical support if you're going to start trying to hook up agentic workflows and MCP servers and building RAGs off the back of it. And but if you just want to do basic stuff just to get going and start to see how you can use it to improve your day to day, then you don't need any of that stuff really. You can just, with the relevant CISO security policies in place, you can use whatever approved LLMs you have. I'm assuming that most people have at least one that they're allowed to use, and just start hacking away at it and seeing what you can do with it. But with some level of training, they can at least be encouraged to use it for good. Like, so not just trying to just effectively just use it to hammer everything, but actually using it for the areas where it excels the most. So I think this is another thing where lunch and learn sessions, or hackathons, not really a hackathon, but like kind of like whatever the product manager version of a hackathon is, where you just get a bunch of people together and say, right, let's here's some some feedback from our product board or whatever, and we're just going to dump it through, and we're going to try and come out with some ideas. And just sort of watch them sort of bouncing and learning off each other. Some people are going to have been using it at home and using it for side projects. Some people have never used it before. And just watch them all sort of opening their eyes together. I think that can be a really powerful thing, and it kind of puts it gives a bit of excitement. It kind of puts the onus on them to kind of help each other out, which obviously helps make it stick then as well. With regards to the layoffs thing, I mean, if we're talking about, well, how do we survive with smaller teams, then I guess the obvious pat answer would be to just say, well, use more AI to cover the gaps. Or what I might say is, for example, in the cases of talking earlier about like managing delivery and managing sprints and doing all those glue bits of work that product managers probably shouldn't really be doing that much of, start to actually challenge engineering teams who are also now having to use AI, start challenging them to actually step up to the plate and start to take some of those things off your plate as well. Because actually, you know, we talk often, not just we, but and I used to be a developer, so I can say this, developers talk about this as well, wanting to be empowered, wanting to be in the room, wanting to be involved in decisions. Well, come and help come and help us do that. Don't just sit in the corner. Come to me and we'll meet in the middle and we'll work out how to share responsibilities around, so that it's not just that we have to have PM for everything. Yeah, we've just laid off some PMs. Feel really bad for those PMs, but now as a team, you know, the obvious easy answer would just be to say, oh, yeah, AI everything. Don't think that's going to work amazingly well for all use cases, but it might work for some. So identify the use cases that it can speed you up, but try and challenge the other, you know, the humans on the other teams to try and step towards you as well, and take some responsibility for some shared responsibility for the stuff that maybe they were able to avoid before. I can't remember what the last one was.
We're actually kind of at time. And I think you lead us into a good direction, because where we were going was the next step on that would be we need to prioritize what we're doing and focus on making the product work aligned to business outcomes. And yes, that is exactly what Jana is going to be talking about. Your friend, Jana Basto, the founder of ProdPad, the founder of Mind the Product, the founder of Product Camp London, the inventor of the Now Next Later roadmap, will be joining us on June 11th for our fourth in the series of product foundations. And she'll walk us through how everyday product decisions create debt, 6 kinds of debt, not just technical debt, and how the Now Next Later roadmap makes those trade-offs visible, so you can have real conversations with stakeholders about what things actually cost, and then you can align your prioritization around that, because we can't boil the ocean. We've got to do things in you know, we need to prioritize what our activities, and they should be in alignment with business outcomes. So Jason, I thank you for your time today, and for sharing these insights. We are going to we have recorded the webinar. We are going to publish it, and slides. I'll ask the question live.
Share I'll slides, send the slides over. I'll send the slides over, and obviously, if anyone wants to drop me a line afterwards about questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, or any other questions, then I'm obviously always happy to connect up afterwards. Happy to answer any questions if we didn't get to yours.
I know you're not a big LinkedIn fan, but you want people to reach out to you there, or?
I am not a LinkedIn fan. I definitely use it a lot more as a Rolodex these days, simply because I find it just almost impossible to find interesting stuff on there. And whenever I post anything, whether it's interesting or not, no one really seems to get shown it. So you know, I have a tortured relationship with LinkedIn, but it's still very useful for connecting. You know, for connecting up, being able to reach people, messaging people. I don't use it for cold outreach or, you know, hacks or anything like that. I still very much prioritize, or try to prioritize at least, authentic conversations about things that have actually happened, and don't use AI, you know, for anything. There's lots of people out there now using AI for their posts. Good luck to them. There are people out there that I know and do respect, but they've basically just started automated AI pipelines to comment on everyone's posts automatically. Good luck to them. I don't do any of that. I'm still trying to keep it real, which is probably why no one talks to me anymore. But I'm definitely keen to connect up, and always happy to answer questions.
Awesome. So the original use case of connecting and networking and meeting and communicating.
That's what we need. We need more of that.
Yes. Yes. Awesome. Well, thank you, Jason. Thank you for everybody for attending, and we will see you in June, hopefully. And if you're in SoCal, come visit us. We've got a happy hour coming up on May 13th, I think, in Tustin. So we'd love to see you in person if you're around. Take care, everybody. Thank you.